Today's lesson is a little bit of historical background to help you understand cinematography a little bit better. By looking at the history of something, we can gain a better appreciation of that something. And this is cinematography. And we've been talking about equipment. We've been discussing different terminology. But we need to look at these people, these giants in the industry that paved the way for cinematography to be what it is today. Someone had to lay down the foundation, right? Someone had to pave the road for other people to come and follow them and move cinematography forward because cinematography is always evolving. So today's lesson is titled Movers and Shakers, the 12 most influential people in cinematic history. When we're talking about movers and shakers, does anybody understand what the term means? Because we use the term with people that are responsible for getting things done, things that had never been done before. We call those people movers and shakers because they move civilization forward. They move the sciences, they move the arts forward, right? We always have people like that. And our modern age, you've probably heard of the captains of industry, people like Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, these people that move forward the computing world and other technologies forward are called movers and shakers. Well, we have those in cinematography also, right? So I think it will be to your advantage to know about some of these contributors. Um, Many people have contributed to the arts and sciences of cinematography. I mean, we can probably make a list of hundreds of thousands of people, but we need to narrow our scope and look at those people whose contributions are more foundational and significant. So I narrow it down to 12 people. And most of them are from the dawn of cinematography, when cinematography began. So let's begin with the first one. This guy here that looked like a wizard, the name was Edward Muybridge. And this guy was not a filmmaker. However, he's number one on our list because he was a photographer. And you know that anything photography, especially at the dawn of the age of photography, had a gigantic impact in cinematography. Because as a matter of fact, what we have been studying for the last several weeks has been photography. And we're going to be integrating that knowledge and those skills to cinematography for the simple reason that we use the same tool, a camera. So Edward Muybridge was an English photographer who was important for pioneering work and not only in motion picture projection, but also in photographic studies. This guy conducted motion sequence still photographic experiments, and he's often called the father of motion picture, even though he never made a film himself in the way that we know films today. He made a very famous experiment, uh, and guys, in this particular lesson, you know that I always tell you to visit my website, and me asking you and you doing it might be two different things. I strongly urge you to always visit my website, and instead of using the PDFs, to use the PowerPoint that I'm making available to you there, because those PowerPoints have the links to videos like this one here. I cannot show you the video because it's not going to project it here, but there's a video here of this very famous experiment that was made by Edward Muybridge. He was hired by a horse owner. He wanted Muybridge to do the experiment because he wanted to buy horses that were fast so he could win horse races. But he was asking himself a question. The question he was asking was if at any moment when horses are running, all four legs are up in the air at any particular moment. What Edward Muybridge did was he made an experiment where he put a bunch of he put I think it was 12 cameras at a certain distance from each other, and he put them at the side of the racing track. So they made the horse run, and he snapped pictures of each time that the horse was going in front of the camera. And when he put that together, it creates the illusion of motion, and you can actually see the horse running. And that is that video is right there in that hyperlink. And they discovered that there is a moment when all hooves are up the ground and up in the air, and that was known because of this experiment. In 1879, he developed something called the supraxiscope, because this was a device that you're seeing there that projected a series of images in successive phases of movement, and it was done with the multiple camera shot that he made. The experiment that I mentioned to you was turned into a movie, and many people consider it the oldest movie ever done, and they consider the supraxiscope the oldest movie projector, but it's not a projector like the projector that we have today. In June 15 of 1878, he recorded this horse running, and this motion picture would last like 1 or 2 seconds, is known as Horse in Motion. And you can see it right there. So I'm going to ask you to please see the video. The second person on our list is Thomas Edison. And I'm sure you have heard of Thomas Edison because this is the guy responsible for two major inventions of the 20th century, the incandescent light bulb. This is the guy that is known as the man that turned the night into day. Because of the incandescent light, people stopped using candles and lanterns and all lanterns, and they started using electricity in their houses to illuminate the house, to illuminate the streets. He also invented something called the phonograph. And the phonograph is the granddaddy of the recorder, of the audio recorder. It was probably the first audio recorder ever made. And this guy had many patents. And in 1888, with his collaborator, Edward Muybridge, the person I just mentioned, they combined the phonograph and the supraxiscope to create a film with synchronized recording. But the results were crude and it was never really used. And Muybridge gave up the projector and he kept on uh, being a photographer, not delving more into the field of cinematography. But uh, Thomas Alva Edison did continue moving there in that field, and he held many patents for many inventions. He had an assistant called W.K. Laurie Dixon, and together they developed something called the kinetoscope, which was a type of uh, device that was intended for photographs that were viewed through a magnifying glass, like the one that you're seeing there. And after receiving celluloid film sheets from George Eastman, remember celluloid is film, Edison adopted these to increase the number of photographs per film to make them a bit longer. And they were working from the very beginning with something called frame rate. Remember frame rate? Frame rate is the rate at which successive images are passed, individual images are passed successively in front of your eyes. And the movies that you see are past that 24 frames per second. But back then, it was not locked down yet. They were experimenting with that. So you could go to Nickelodeon. A Nickelodeon was like a parlor where you could go and use different type of entertaining devices for a nickel. That's why it was called Nickelodeon. And you could see a movie looking through that viewfinder. What was considered a movie back then. A movie back then would be someone probably like posing and showing their muscles, someone sneezing and cleaning their face. Very entertaining stuff. Someone doing like what was called monkey shining, or like throwing up batons in the air or balls in the air, and think those were the movies of the time. So Thomas Alva Edison really pushed the field forward. The other person that I have in this list is George Eastman, and George Eastman was the guy that uh, founded Eastman Kodak Company, which was a very famous company when your mommies and daddies were younger. Back in that day, when you say Kodak, Kodak was synonymous with pictures with photography. And this particular person is responsible for popularizing celluloid, also known as film. That person. So that was his big contribution: roll film or celluloid, which is the basis for motion picture photography. And he was, as I said, a collaborator of Thomas Alva Edison. Here they are together in the picture in 1928. Another famous individual is W.K. Laurie Dickinson. This guy was a Scottish engineer and he worked for Edison, but later on he decided to make his own company, move on by himself. This guy is responsible for making something called the kinetoscope and a short film called Monkey Shines Number One. He also built the first motion picture laboratory called the Black Maria. Let me show you a picture of the Black Maria. That was the first movie studio, if you want to look at it that way, in New Jersey. Not Hollywood. Hollywood did not exist. There was a place in California called Hollywood Land, but it had nothing to do with motion picture photography at all. So the place where they started actually working in the United States in the field of cinematography was in New Jersey, New York, and New Jersey. And as you can see, there's a picture of Laurie standing in front of that studio, Black Maria, because the building was black. Okay, two people that I consider that were geniuses and very, very important in the history of cinematography are the Lumiere brothers, the Lumiere Auguste and Louis. And they were French and they pioneered something called the cinematograph. The cinematograph is where cinematography obtains its name from their invention. And they were manufacturers of photographic equipment. And they were actually the ones that developed the kind of camera and projector that people know the most. Because before them, before the cinematograph, if you wanted to see a movie, you had to look at it through a kinetoscope or a suprasiscope, right? I mean, you have to look through a viewfinder and see the celluloid film that was rolled in front of you. These guys were the first ones to project an image on a screen, which is the way that we consume movies nowadays, right? You see your TV screen or you go to a theater and see the movie screen. They invented the cinematograph. They became very rich because of that. And they used 35 millimeter film, which is today's standard. So they're pioneers in a lot of ways. We discussed the different sizes or gauges of film like a month ago, I believe. There's a engraving of how they would exhibit their films. They usually would go to an opera house or a theater. That's why we call the cinema the theater. We say, I'm going to the theater, but you don't see people having plays there. We go to see movies. I think that a more correct, a more precise term, which is what the one the Europeans use, is calling it the cinema. I'm going to the cinema. I'm going to the theater. You don't have people making plays there. In the theater, you went to go to see plays or operas, not movies. But in the early ages, that was the best type of facility available. What would they show there? Guys, you have some very interesting videos there that you need to see. Please see them. And you're going to see stuff like, for example, a train arriving to a train station in the late 1800s. There's a story that goes that the first time this was shown in a theater by the Lumiere brothers, chaos ensued because people had never seen a movie. They didn't know what it was. They're seeing this image being projected in front of them. And when they saw this train coming to the screen, they started running away because they thought that the train was going to run them over. You might think of it as silly, but who knows, maybe you or me will be one of those that will be running away from the train, right? If we thought the train was coming in our direction. So they also made another film here that you're going to see titled Workers Leaving the Factory. And all this happened in France in the 1800s. 80s. Another French contributor to the field of cinematography is Georges Méliès. He's my favorite one. Georges Méliès used to be a professional magician. And one day he went to see one of these Lumiere brothers movies, and it was love at first sight. He fell in love with cinematography. He said, I got to get myself in this thing because this is incredible. So he had these skills as a magician and he brought them over. He made his own studio and he started making movies where he incorporated uh, his magical talents, right? His talents as a magician, as an illusionist. And I would like for you to see the video that is here, called The Conjurer, I mean. And he also made the first science fiction film ever made, La Voyage des la Lune, in 1902. It means the voyage to the moon. He is known as the father of special effects. And once you see the video, you'll go like, wow, now I can see why. So I'm encouraging you to watch the George Lemire links that are here, the George Lemire video links, because they are impressive, very impressive. And finally, the last person I'm going to be sharing with you, because we only have time for 6 today, is Edwin Porter. Edwin Porter was also another employee of Thomas Edison. A lot of people seem to have began with Thomas Edison, right? Because I mean, when Thomas Edison was alive, he was like the biggest technology industrialist of his time. So people will be working and collaborating with him. So this man was famous because he was a director that pioneered several things. He began as a cameraman, but he moved up from being a cameraman to being a director. And he started making his own short dramas and comedies also. This guy is responsible for over 250 films that most of them are lost in time. They disappeared. And he is important because he started incorporating techniques that made film a narrative medium. Remember, when we use the word narrative means what? To tell a story. Narrative means to tell a story. Narration is telling a story. And remember that you consume stories visually through film because you guys confessed to me that you're not readers. You don't like reading very much, which I think is sad and it limits you a lot. So that's something you might have to overcome. But it's more natural for you to consume stories visually through movies because you're visual. But you should not limit yourself to visual media only. But this guy is one of those pioneers that he started using narrative techniques or the visual language of cinema to tell stories. Like, for example, in one of his movies, he made the first close up in cinematic history of close up in a movie titled The Life of an American Fireman. What are close ups used for? When we close up into something and we get close to it and and we're entering into the space of something because at that particular moment we're saying this is important, look. That's what a close up does. This is important, look. That's why we're closing in, because if it were not important we would not be close. When we're closing into something, because we're saying, look, this is important. So that's a narrative device that is visual, right? That close up. So he made the first close up. In addition to that, he made a movie, which is his most famous movie, called The Great Train Robbery, which is a Western. And in The Great Train Robbery, this movie is important, not as much for the way, not the camera work, but how the movie was edited. You know that you shoot footage, right? You shoot it. And then you have to take that footage and put it together in a way that it will make it tell a story. You have to turn it into a cohesive whole. And he was this movie is famous because of the trade crane robbery was the first movie that was shot out of order, and then it was edited to tell a story in order. That's known as continuity editing. Guys, that's the way movies are shot today. I don't know if you know this, but any movie that's being shot today, the movie's not shot in order. Is that clear? If you thought that, okay, let's begin in page one of the script, that's not how it's done. You can begin probably at the end or in the middle. Eventually, you're going to shoot all the scenes that you need, but you don't need to shoot them in order. And sometimes it's impossible because many of these actors, they have very busy schedules, and sometimes it's very difficult to get them in a particular moment for a particular shot. So you have to shoot what you can while you have these people, and you have to plan this very carefully around the schedule of these people that you have hired. So, like for example, take right now an example. They're shooting a movie called The Batman. Maybe you saw the trailer, right? How many of you saw the trailer? Okay. They're still shooting that movie. They had to stop shooting it because of coronavirus. They began shooting it 3 weeks ago. And guess what? Several days into shooting, they had to stop again. Why? Because Robert Pattinson, the guy playing the role, got coronavirus. So what are you gonna do when one person is not there and everybody else is? Wait for that person to come back or keep on shooting? You have no, you have to keep on shooting because time is money. You know how many millions of dollars is spent daily in shooting a movie, or hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's ridiculous. So you can no, 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 because you what you can do is you keep on shooting other scenes that do not involve that character because he's not in every scene. Did you get that? He's not in every scene, so you can shoot other things. And then when he comes back, when he gets better, if he gets better, I heard he's getting better. Then you shoot his scenes, but that's going to be out of order. Do you understand? But at the end of the day, when they get all their shots, they're going to edit the movie where the scenes are told in order. Everything is told in order, and the movie will make sense to you. So the guy that pioneered the continuity editing was Edwin Porter. So I'm going to ask you to please check out the PowerPoint in my website, watch the videos, and in our next lesson, we will continue talking about the other six contributors, guys. Okay? Any question before I leave? They're always there. What? They're they're inside the presentation. They're always inside the presentation. Look here. Look here. You see that picture? You see that it says click in that corner? Well, you click on that picture and the video will come, but you have to run this as a slideshow. But the fact that you're asking me that question now is telling me that you've never seen a video from these PowerPoint presentations because they are part of the class. And I've been saying since the get-go that you have to see them. It is not optional. It is a requirement. So until you see those videos, the class is not complete. And I want to remind you that you guys are taking tests. I can ask you questions of the videos, and I will. So, guys, it's important that you follow instructions, okay? Ms. Hayashi, go ahead. Well, that's one of the things. The other thing I want you to tell me is why um, you can make comments about the exposure and explain the composition, why you decided to set up that subject that way. Yeah, you can do all that in one paragraph. Sure, keep it short and sweet. All right? Guys, any other question before I let you go? Yes, because it's not, yeah, because it's a project. Yeah. Yeah, it's portfolio. Yeah. You cannot upload that because it's portfolio. Yeah, go ahead. No. We do reshoots after a lesson has concluded, madam. That's why you notice in the LMS that it's not asking you to send anything. But when you check out the next LMS lesson, which is the continuation and conclusion of this lesson, then it's going to ask you to do so. Exactly. So nobody has any business doing the reshoot because we're not done yet. Okay. Does that make sense to you? Okay. All right. Any other question? Okay, then I'm out of here. Guys, take care. I'll be seeing you soon Monday. I wish you success with your photographic projects. Don't forget that you're only sending one photograph, your best one, your best work. Okay? So God bless you all. Have a great day.